Hello everybody, welcome to this session on writing a narrative CV, and I'm really grateful to Taryn Bell from the University of Leeds, who's a research development advisor at the University of Leeds with a special interest in supporting people with fellowships, and has a wealth of information on how to write a really good narrative CV. So I'm sure you'll find this session really helpful. Taryn's going to speak for about 20-25 minutes, so we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. If you have any questions for Taryn, she's happy to take those at the end. So I think I'll hand over to you, Taryn, if that's okay. And I know you're already sharing slides, so hopefully that should all go fine. Thanks again, Taryn.
Brilliant. Thank you, Louise. And thank you to all of you who are spending your well-earned lunch break learning about narrative CVs. I know for many of you, it's not necessarily something you're looking forward to, but hopefully what I'll be able to show you over the next 20 minutes or so is that these are a really useful way to be able to showcase a range of experiences when applying for NIHR funding. So who am I? What do I know about narrative CVs? Well, I work at the University of Leeds supporting our research community and supporting people who apply for funding. And I also have a kind of half a foot in careers as well. So this is for me something that I talk about a lot. And so I'm the kind of lead at the University of Leeds on narrative CVs. And I previously worked at the University of York and supported researchers with narrative CVs there too. So I have read a lot, edited a lot, provided a lot of support over the years on narrative CVs. So I probably think about them a lot more than most people do. So that's why I'm here today to talk about how to write your narrative CV. Now, many of you aren't academic researchers. You don't have an academic background. Someone's got their mic on. If you wouldn't mind just muting it, that would be super helpful. As I said, many of you won't be academic researchers. You may not have a research background at all. And so the notion of writing what is a CV that has been designed for research may feel a bit daunting. So I'm here today to help you understand what the narrative CV is. And for those of you working in public health or social care, how you can write your own narrative CV, or what I might refer to as an NCV. When I say NCV, I literally just mean narrative CV. So the narrative CV has existed for maybe around 8 years now, developed in about 2018 by the Royal Society, who are one of the UK's national science funders. And they brought out this new type of CV, essentially because they realised that that traditional style of academic CV, lots and lots of bullet points, just lots of lists of everything you've ever done, doesn't actually provide a space for the kind of broader achievements that that people do besides research. As I said, this was designed for researchers. The good thing for you is that the narrative CV is designed to acknowledge and celebrate different kinds of experience. So those coming into research from a non-research background, this will really benefit you. I think actually calling it a narrative CV is quite a bad name for it. I don't think CV is potentially very useful. I tend to think of it more as a structured personal statement. So a lot of people, once they write a narrative CV, they go, oh, this feels a bit more like a cover letter than a CV. It often does. And there's a similarity there, because if you think about what the core aim of the narrative CV is, it's not about listing everything you have ever done. It's about demonstrating that you are the best person to carry out the research that you're applying for and make a success of that award. So if we look at NIHR's own guidance, they say, and I'm quoting here, you will need to decide which of your skills and experience are relevant. This will depend upon the opportunity to which you're applying. You should describe a range of contributions that best evidences your ability to carry out the proposed work. So my first piece of advice is refrain from the tendency to want to write everything you have ever done. This is a much more tailored document. So what I often do with researchers before they write their narrative CV, I say to them, imagine you are writing a job description for the award that you're applying for. Say you're applying for a doctoral award and it's going to require you to work with care experienced young people, or maybe it'll require you to know how to carry out statistical analysis. And I always say to people, list me all the skills and experience that you would need to carry out the proposed award. And essentially, that is what you need to be demonstrating in your narrative CV, and you need to demonstrate that you meet those criteria. And if you don't meet those criteria, they need to go in your training and development plan later down the line. So the narrative CV and the training plan are two interconnected parts of that application and fit really nicely together. The narrative CV shows the skills that you have, and the training and development plan shows how you're going to use the award to develop them further. Now, the thing that people often struggle with is, what on earth do I put in my narrative CV? Because, and I completely understand that the titles that are used for each section can feel a bit overwhelming, and you can sit there and think, oh, I don't have a research background. What am I meant to put? So let's look at sections 1 to 4 first, because these are very much the same. They ask you for your contributions in 4 separate areas. The first asks for your contributions to the generation of new ideas, tools, methodologies, or knowledge. They're very long section titles, so just bear with. This first one is really asking you to include any research experience that you have, if you have research experience. If not, you can mention things like audits, evaluation, or quality improvement work. So maybe you designed and implemented a new kind of needs assessment, or maybe you introduced a new data collection system. Similarly, if you've won any funding or awards for anything you've done, that's kind of showing innovation in your work area, in your area of work, then that can go in there too. Section 2 is a little bit more straightforward. This asks for contributions to the development of others and the maintenance of effective working relationships. This is essentially, are you a nice person to work with? Do you support the other people around you? And if so, how? So maybe you can include people management. Maybe you've supervised people. Maybe you've mentored colleagues. Maybe you've line managed colleagues. You could talk about developing and delivering training for other people to improve their skills. That's that development of others. Maybe you showed leadership. You've led an initiative or been a leader of a team or a project. But you can also include things like teamwork. So how have you worked in a team? How did your expertise contribute to the team's success? As well as any collaborations, working with other people. Again, that's a very people-focused section. It's not just thinking about you, it's thinking about the influence you have on those around you. The third section, and again, if you're not a researcher, this can be a bit annoying, the title of this section, contributions to the wider research community. But essentially what we're asking here is, how are you working with people outside your immediate team? Maybe you're working on a multi-agency initiative or a project. Maybe you're working with another service. Maybe you're improving workplace culture in some ways. Maybe you're sitting on a committee. Maybe you're disseminating your work. Perhaps you've presented findings at a regional forum or shared knowledge with other colleagues. Again, this is thinking not just in your team, but beyond. How are you helping the wider community that you work with? And then that fourth section is contributions to broader society. And essentially what NIHR are asking here is they're asking, how do you engage with patients or the public or your service users? How do you engage, if you do, in industry or across private sectors or the public sector or public engagement? So for you, maybe you collaborated with community organisations to co-produce some new materials, or maybe you contributed to policy development in public health strategy or something like that. There's a lot that you can include there, and it doesn't have to just be from your current role. It can be from anything, just like a regular CV, anything you have done in the past. It can even include things you've done in voluntary roles too. Say you sit as a trustee on a board in a voluntary role or something like that. Include it. If you think it shows useful skills that you will need to do this award, include it in your narrative CV, absolutely. The other question I often get from people is, do all 4 sections need to be the same length? No, they do not. You will be stronger in some areas than others. So I would say from a research, when I work with researchers, they're usually very strong here, and then less strong in these 2 areas, particularly researchers at an early stage of their research career. For many of you working in public health, for example, you actually might be quite strong down here, maybe not so strong up here. That is absolutely fine, as long as it's all included in there somewhere. The reviewers are not marking this section by section. They are taking the narrative CV as a whole document, so don't worry about there being an exact balance between each section. The way I like to see these first 4 sections is I kind of view them as your spheres of influence. So the first section is kind of thinking about any research or evaluation, audit you've done, the kind of the stuff you work on day to day. Then you're thinking a bit more broadly about the people who work directly with you on a regular basis. Then you're thinking about that wider community. Then you're thinking about non-researchers, non-academics generally. So essentially what the narrative CV is asking you to do is it's asking you to think about those varying spheres of influence, because that is what NIHR wants to fund. It wants to fund people who are trying to have that broader influence over the course of their career. So once you've got all these examples, how do you actually turn them into a narrative CV? What does it actually look like? And again, this is where I really want you to understand that this is where there is a real change from traditional CVs that you may be used to writing with all the bullet points, kind of listing your role, listing the bullet points, listing another role, listing all the bullet points. Narrative CV is totally different. Doesn't look like that at all. With traditional CVs, we're used to just listing everything that we've done. And I would refer to them as kind of what documents. They just want to know what you did. A narrative CV is not just about the what, it's about the how and the why. How did you do it? And why does it matter? Why should I care? Essentially, as I put on the slide here, what that means is no more lists. You do not need to be listing everything you've ever done. It's a tailored document. The way I like to encourage researchers to write this is through car stories. Some of you may know car stories. They're very good if you're at interview. They're very good if you're writing an application form for a job. Some of you may know them as the STAR method. If you've ever applied for a civil service job, they love the STAR method. I like CAR. I think it's nice and pithy. CAR stands for context, action, results. Essentially, what we are asking you to tell us is, what was the situation? What was the task? What was the thing that you were doing? How did you do it? What skills did you use? What steps did you take to achieve it? And what was the effect? What was the impact? What's your evidence? And I'll show you some examples in just a minute. But this is a really succinct way of bringing together, I was asked to do this thing, this is what I did, this was the end result. And that goes from just that kind of listing everything you've ever done to explaining to me the skills that you have, the experience that you have, and to providing that evidence that it's had some impact. Now, speaking of impact, people tend to struggle with this final element, the results. So on this next slide, what I'm going to show you is some examples of evidence. The classic example of evidence that people tend to use in a CV or that they think of first is numbers. Everybody loves numbers. So people tend to think, oh, maybe I'll include some quantitative data, numerical stuff, maybe data or metrics. Maybe I can demonstrate that there's been an improvement in health outcomes, an increase in service uptake. Maybe I've got something about the number of individuals we reached or the savings we achieved or a reduction in waiting times. If you've come out with a report or a blog or a podcast or a publication, maybe you can talk about the number of times it's been cited or downloaded or viewed. Or maybe you won some funding, you can talk about the amount of funding that you won. But actually, for much of what we do in our working lives, we don't necessarily have neat numbers like that. So don't forget what I'd refer to as qualitative evidence too. Things like producing a report or an evaluation at the end of it. Maybe you could mention things like feedback from participants where you are allowed to share that, or very commonly, testimonials from colleagues. I ran this intervention and my colleague said that this made a big contribution or something like that. Where your colleague has actually said, this has been really helpful, or thank you for your contribution to this area. You can even quote them if you want to. Things like new or continuing collaborations, you could say we set up a collaboration, it's still ongoing, or we set up a collaboration and this has led to another collaboration. That's really good evidence that you're able to collaborate and work with other people. You can include success stories from those you've supported. So maybe you mentored a colleague and they went on to get a promotion or something like that, or you worked with a particular service and they were able to improve their services as a result. Maybe it's things like media coverage or press releases. Maybe it's peer recognition. Maybe you were invited to sit on a committee or give a talk. Maybe you won an award. There's all these different kinds of evidence. And this slide is not exhaustive. There's lots of different ways of evidencing that you've had an impact, but this is just some of the most common examples that I tend to see. So how does this all come together? How do you actually write a CAR story? Keep it as simple as possible. So say that one of the examples that you want to say is that you led a community engagement initiative to increase maternal health service uptake. This is a completely made up example, by the way. So if you're working on maternal health, I apologise because maybe the numbers may not be entirely realistic, but hopefully this will be a useful example. Let's say during my time at wherever I work, we identified low maternal health service uptake in certain local communities. That's my context. It's as simple as that. It's really not complicated. But what did I do? What's my action? I led a community engagement initiative, conducting focus groups to understand barriers to access and holding meetings with community groups to create culturally sensitive messaging. So we've clearly got actions there. Led initiative, conducted focus groups, held meetings. We've got some clear steps there. I don't just have an idea of they led an initiative. I know what that looked like in practice. And the result was, within 6 months, antenatal clinic attendance rose by 15%, and this allowed us to meet with families who'd never previously engaged with our services. So we've got a little bit of quantitative evidence there, and also a little bit of qualitative. From your perspective, you were meeting with families who'd never previously engaged. Let's try another example quickly. Let's say this is an example where you want to show that you have the ability to develop others, you have the ability to train others. So you trained a new colleague in trauma-informed practice. Well, for me, my question as a reviewer would be, trained how? What does that look like? And what impact did it have? How do we know that your training had some effect? So let's start off with very simple context. A new colleague joined the team and I was asked to provide training in trauma-informed practice. Pretty simple, that's all we need. In the action, I combine theory and practical knowledge, giving them an understanding of the theoretical background, while also providing opportunities to practice this approach using role play in a safe environment. And what's our result? My colleague later reported that they felt more confident using the techniques I taught them and that they were better able to engage with families as a result. So the evidence there is all qualitative. It's just what your colleagues reported back to you. These are very similar, actually, these CAR stories, to the kinds of things that you may have used in interviews before when they say things like, tell us about a time when you handled conflict, or tell us about a time when you worked in a team, kind of thing. And actually, that is the basis for writing your narrative CV. So when you're bringing this all together in sections 1 to 4, what I'd really encourage you to do for each section is just start off with a simple opening sentence which summarises your overall contribution in that area. You can say, I've worked in public health for 15 years, specialising in this area, and then you back that up with just 2 or 3 detailed examples, most of which are probably going to be in that CAR format. And it really is as simple as that. If you think about those 4 sections, that probably means you're going to have no more than 8 to 12 examples in total. And so you need, as I said before, to think really carefully about what it is that you actually want to showcase, what best shows that you can do the research that you're applying for. So again, tailor. Make sure the examples that you give are tailored to the award that you're applying for. Make sure that they are relevant to the skills that you will need during that award. These 4 sections then lead really nicely on to section 5, which essentially asks about your suitability for the awards. Now, the first 4 questions are backwards looking. Section 5 is explicitly future focused. It asks, how have your prior experiences supported your career goal? You have to tell them the research career that you'd like to develop or that you are developing. They ask you to say how the experience described above has supported those career goals. And they also say that that award should provide you with a step change in your career trajectory. So they ask you to describe the potential impact of this award on your career and how it will support your stated aspirations. Now, sections 1 to 4 fit into this really. You've gone through all 4 areas. Now you need to think about bringing all of these together. How of all of these together, how do these make you unique and how do they support your career goal? So the first thing to answer is, what are your career aspirations? Now, people often get career goals and research goals mixed up. Career goals are more about the path you want to take in your career. So my question is kind of, what do you want to achieve in the next 10 to 20 years? How would you like to be introduced? What kind of work overall, how would you like to be doing? And how would you like to do it? This is about what are you working towards? It's not just about finishing that specific project. You've got to think bigger. You've then got to think, okay, so that's my goal. How has my experience so far helped me get towards that goal, make that goal more realistic? So think back to that last slide. This is about bringing all of those experiences together to explain why combined they make you ready to undertake this award and move on to that next career goal. And then that final bit, and this is a bit that people often ignore, is the potential impact of the award. Funders always ask you to explain this. What will change as a result of this award? The question I really think you should answer here is, what does this award, this NIHR award, allow you to do that other opportunities won't? What will this do for you that maybe getting a promotion or maybe taking up a research post elsewhere won't do for you? Essentially, for a lot of you, it's going to provide me the time, an opportunity and space and training to push my career forward. That's probably what most people say. But in this, you're going to want to think about the impact both on your research, but also on you as a researcher going forwards. And this then, as I said earlier, feeds into the training and development plan, because the last message I want you to take away from today is that you are not expected to know everything going into your award. That's the point of the award, to help you train and develop. So think about that imaginary job description I talked about at the beginning. Imagine you've got that job description in your narrative CV, you've managed to fulfill maybe 80% of those criteria. And then that remaining 20%, you need to put that in your training and development plan and show how you're going to use that time and that money and that resource to develop your skills further and help achieve those career goals. So again, don't worry about having to prove that you can do everything, because some of it you're going to develop and you're going to train over the course of the award itself. So, unsurprisingly, my key messages for today are firstly to tailor that CV. If you were to write a narrative CV for something else, you'd probably write quite a different narrative CV, because it needs to be tailored to this individual award, tailored to the skills and experiences that you need to develop. And what that means is, with a narrative CV, the reviewers are looking for quality over quantity. They are not asking you to list everything you have ever done. They are asking you to demonstrate how those specific experiences have provided you with a wealth of skills and knowledge and understanding that are going to help you to make this award a success, that make you the best person for this award. Now, I realise in doing all of this, many of you will probably still feel quite daunted by the notion of writing a narrative CV. And I would say that's okay. Most people find it quite daunting until they've actually written the first draft, until they've actually put some ideas down on paper. But there is lots of support out there to help you craft your narrative CV. There's a link on the slides which will be sent round afterwards, a link to the Specialist Centre for Public Health's contact form, which will allow you to get support from them. And I've also listed some other things there. So there is, for example, some narrative CV resources which I've put together, which also includes frequently asked questions. We have a guide at Leeds called Creating Your Resume for Researchers, which is another name for the narrative CV. It's very research focused, but it may help you to sort of understand what's going on. And then we also have some open access resources on how to write a car story. And there's an online guide to 5 steps to narrative CV success. So there is loads of support out there for you. It takes time, and you will probably have to draft and draft again. But I promise you, actually, when you write this, it probably won't feel that different from a traditional cover letter or from preparing for an application form for a job or an interview. So best of luck to all of you who are looking to apply for an NIHR award. I wish you all the best and lots of luck. And I will be around for the next 20 minutes or so to answer any questions that you have for me. So best of luck to you all and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you so much, Taryn. That was super helpful. Some really practical tips and advice, and I think really helps to sort of demystify the narrative CV. So I think we're all in NIHR world, we're a little bit terrified of the narrative CV. We're quite new to it. But I think I know a really nicely made point about it being, you know, an opportunity actually to showcase what you've done that you might not get from a more traditional CV. So really helpful. So as Taryn said, she's here for, we've got another almost 20 minutes left in this session. If anybody has any questions, I have had a look at the chat. So far, the chat is all just saying thank you very much, Taryn, and I think everyone's found it really super helpful. And lots of thumbs up and claps and so on. So I can't actually see any questions, although
I can see a couple of hands up.
oh,
so
brilliant,
I can
yes.
see, I think it's Kate's got her hand up, Kate Austin.
Thanks very much, Taryn. That's really helpful. I'm just applying at the moment for the pre-application support fund. So got a deadline coming up, so some really helpful tweaks I can make. One of my questions was going to be, what do you think about putting in not long subheadings, but maybe keyword subheadings to break up each of those 5 sections, just to kind of draw the assessor's attention to maybe a key thing that you want them to look at? Or does that annoy assessors having lots of bold in there?
No, I've seen that done recently. I mean, so NIHR has one of the longer narrative CV formats. So other funders, they tend to be quite short documents. So people don't usually put headings in because there's not space. But because NIHR is 3 pages, I actually think, you know, go ahead, put headings in. It's not going to disadvantage you.
Great, thank you.
And then our next one is Donna.
Hello. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. So I'm just about to submit an NIHR application, and at the end of my narrative CV, I've mentioned my supervision team, and I wasn't sure if talking about the fact that they are there to support me is appropriate for the narrative CV, or whether they should be mentioned somewhere else.
I would say it's a good thing to mention. You could mention your supervision team in module 5 when you're talking about how this award will add value, but I think really they're going to go in your training and development plan as well, where you really demonstrate, because actually, so when we talk about, I'll go into this in very quick detail. When we talk about training and development, people often think that means taking courses, but actually mentorship, social support, you know, supervisors, all of those are a key part of your training and development plan. So probably they're mainly going to go in there rather than in the narrative CV, but you could also briefly mention them in module 5 as just another thing that this award will provide you that other options wouldn't.
Thank you. I've done both, so that's really helpful. Thank you.
Brilliant. Before I go over to you, Chloe, I'm just going to answer a couple of questions in the chat. So someone has said, would it be reasonable to say in the narrative CV something like, I realise this is an area of weakness, so I've included this in my personal development plan? Perfectly valid, but I would, rather than making it sound like a negative, because I always say to people, don't talk yourself down, rather than saying this is an area of weakness, say, the NIHR award will allow me to develop in these key areas that I have identified. And then rather than it sounding like, oh, I'm not very good at this, you're turning it around and turning it into a positive and saying, look, I've identified that I would like to develop in this area, this area, and this area, and this will help me achieve my career goals. And then you can go on into that in your personal development plan. So again, don't talk yourselves down. Don't give the reviewers a reason to doubt you. Make it sound like you have a plan, you know where you need to go, and you just need to kind of fill those gaps or develop those skills. There's a simpler question from Kefiki. How long would you recommend the CV to be? There's a 3-page limit, if I remember correctly, Louise. I think that's what it says on the award page. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah, for the NIHR, it's 3 pages. So, yeah,
oh, perfect. So you've already answered that one. Perfect. Chloe, on to you.
Oh yes, thank you so much for your help with this, because I think I've definitely in my head made it more complicated than it needs to be. And as an art therapist, I do love an image, and obviously, my question is, would there be space for, if it's appropriate and supports my what I've written, is there space for images to be placed within the narrative CV?
That's a very good question, Louise. Do you know if is there any guidance on images?
And I've seen absolutely no guidance around whether or not you can include an image. And I think it is an excellent question, and I don't know. It's the honest answer, and I mean, it's certainly one way to stand out, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so my feeling is best thing to do. Maybe we need to ask NIHR that to double check. But my feeling is, if it's clear evidence of an output, if you can say it led to this, this was the output, and you can show a picture as an output, I don't see there's anything wrong with that. What I would say is a picture can take up quite a lot of space, so just make sure it's not getting in the way of you being able to explain why it's important.
Okay, so don't let it be the distraction. Yes.
Yeah. Artie's got a question. You mentioned in your job description, Alad, you should include 80% within current skills and 20% in the training and development plan. Is there an optimal skills versus training ratio? That was just an example. There is no real ratio. For some of you, you may have almost all the skills you need. You just need to target one or two very specific areas. So don't worry about the 80-20 split. That was literally just an example that was making up off the top of my head. Is it appropriate if the skills development potentially outweighs current skills? At that point, I would say if there is more skills, if the skills development feels overbalanced against current skills, that would suggest to me you are underselling yourself. And this is what we have with researchers all the time, is we find that they really struggle to communicate those skills. That is what the Specialist Centre for Public Health is there to support you on. So I would get in touch with the Specialist Centre for Public Health and get them to work on this with you, because I think most researchers really, and actually many of you aren't researchers presently, most people undersell themselves. So find someone to help you bring those skills out so that you feel a bit more confident going into it. Christine.
Taryn, thank you for that presentation. The way that you've described it has been really, really helpful for me, and it is the kind of thing that I might do for kind of a job interview preparation, almost like thinking about your stories that you might tell. I guess that this isn't fully thought through, but what I'm kind of quite interested in is what happens if you're applying for an award where there are established researchers also applying for that award. And I'm just wondering whether you have any experience of being on the other end of it on a panel where narrative CVs are being reviewed. I can see that for people who don't have a traditional research career, this format may be more helpful. But I'm also thinking that a lot of the people sat on panels probably are people who have had quite traditional research careers. And are they still going to be looking for those things about, well, how many publications have you had, and the more traditional metrics? So are people kind of using that, people with research backgrounds using narrative CVs just as a way to reframe their existing research experience? And is there any evidence that it's helping different people get through awards?
So interestingly, there have been some reports published earlier this year that said that actually what reviewers are saying is that they are better able to understand the career trajectories of non-academic or people with a non-traditional background. So actually they find the narrative CV easier to understand because I think, and this is why car stories are useful, because it puts what you're doing into context. It explains what you did, explains how you did it, and it explains why it matters. And that's better than one or two sentences on a traditional CV that said, you know, improved service evaluation by 20% or something like that. This is why tailoring is really important, because yes, there will be people applying for these awards who are academics, but they will not be applying for the same thing as you. They will be applying for a particular, you know, you and they will be applying for the same award, but for different reasons, for different things. And that's why tailored CV is so important, because what they are looking for at heart is for you to demonstrate that you have the particular combination. I sound like I'm quoting the film Taken at this point, but you have a particular combination of skills and experiences that allow you to do that specific thing. So if there's an academic researcher applying, they're applying for their award, we can just ignore them. What they're really comparing is the award that you're applying for, the research that you're applying to do, versus your CV. And if those two things are nicely aligned, that is what they want. That is where you will get higher marks. So yeah, It's often a thing that people worry about, you know, am I going to be disadvantaged? But actually, this is where we find, and this is, the research backs this up, reviewers like these because they better understand non-academic researchers' careers and skills and experiences.
That's great, thank you.
And I'll maybe just to add to that, Taryn, that although you all apply through the same application system for the NIHR awards, they are then triaged out to different panels depending on your area. So if you're applying from public health or social care, you should go to the local authority public health and social care panel. So, yeah. And
the other thing I would say as well, if you do not come from a research background, they are not going to experience. They're not going to expect, a researcher's outputs. You know, if you've worked for, say, in public health your entire career, they're going to expect you to have a long list of peer-reviewed publications or experience supervising PhD students or something like that. They're not comparing you against an academic candidate. It's just a completely different thing. So hopefully that gives you a bit of confidence that the reviewing process will be fair on you. Brilliant. Jakarin.
Hi, thanks for your really clear presentation. It's been dead helpful to sort of make it a bit more simpler, but I think I do sometimes overthink things. So I'm going to just clarify it today here so I don't overthink something. Is that, you know, when you were saying I'm setting the criteria, so at the moment I'm thinking of applying for the pre-application support fund to develop my idea. So I'm a social worker by background in child protection, and I kind of know what I want to do, but I don't know how to do it. And I want to apply for the funding to figure out how to do it. So at the moment, it feels like my criteria is learn everything you can about research. That kind of, so it is for methodology. And when I'm thinking about criteria, where and how within that narrative CV do I put that in? I've got my narrative is that I'm a social worker. I see the gaps and I want to know more about it. And it is that sentence. There is no more to the CV at the moment. So to develop that, to think of how do I make that into sort of what is needed and what I've already got. I mean, if I think deep enough, I can fill in all the sort of different things you've told us for the different sections, but it's that criteria I'm overthinking already.
I would say that really what you're going to want to demonstrate is that because you know that you want to develop an idea because you have the experience, you have the knowledge base. So use the narrative CV to demonstrate how you have the experience, how you have the knowledge base, how that prepares you. So it might be that the first section is quite a big one for you, where you're demonstrating that you've developed this knowledge base over time. That you know that helps you to recognize the gaps. You've done the work. It might be that particularly if you're a social worker, that makes me think of section 4, where you're working with the public, because you'll be coming into contact with the public all the time as part of your research. So really think about trying to demonstrate that you've got that knowledge base, and then what I would say is, overthinking is a very common thing. I see it with researchers all the time. Everyone worries, how do I demonstrate that I can do all of these things? But again, that is what the Specialist Centre for Public Health can help you with. If you're really struggling to bring out your expertise, there is support there available for you.
Okay, maybe I'll knock on their door just to see how to bring in like what is needed. So I understand about demonstrating what I've already got. I actually don't know what I need to, like, other than that I need to learn everything before I can, you know, it's like I can imagine like PPI, something like that. There's a few different topics you can put down, but in general, how to like develop that and how to make it into a structured paragraph or a couple of sentences saying this is something I'm going to work on. Yeah, maybe I go and have a deeper conversation outside a quick catch up here.
Yeah, I thought what Taryn said sort of really near the start of her presentation was really helpful when she talked about like writing the job description for what it is you want to do, because then you can talk about in your narrative CV what you've already got, and then build that last part about why you need the award. And particularly for the pre-application award, I think that's about getting you in a position to submit a competitive application for the career development awards. So,
because I think
that makes better sense now. Thank you.
I think as well with the pre-application support fund, actually some of the development time that you need is to learn how to write a grant. I was actually writing a paper about this the other day about how actually grant writing in itself is a skill that has to be learnt. Fellowship writing, award writing is something that you have to be learnt. So that's probably one of the things that you're going to spend most of your time on, learning how to develop an idea, maybe learning methodologies, PPI, that kind of thing, and then learning actually how to communicate those ideas. That's a key part of this as well. Yeah. Do we have any more burning questions? Or have I just exhausted everyone with knowledge and everyone needs to go and have a good sit down and a cup of tea now?
I think everyone's going away feeling reassured, Taryn, that you've kind of broken it down into a much more manageable thing to tackle that I think we were all feeling a bit daunted by before. So huge thanks to you for that. And for stepping in. You know, we are doing this on behalf of the Specialist Centre for Public Health and Specialist Centre for Social Care as well. And Taryn has really kindly come from University of Leeds. So thanks very much, Taryn. A few questions about the recording. Alex, who's on the call, will circulate it as soon as possible. But I guess by the end of today, Alex, would that be fair to say?
Yes, end of today.
Thanks, Alex. So yeah, we'll get it out as soon as possible.
Okay, hopefully you all feel a bit more confident. Go have a go. The best way to learn how to write a CV is to try and write a narrative CV. So best of luck to all of you, and hopefully I'll see you all getting some awards very, very soon.
Thank you. Thanks again, Terry. Hugely appreciate it. It's really, really helpful. Thanks very much.
Happy to
Thanks
help.
very
happy to help.
much.
Thank you both.
Bye.